What is education, and why is education important? Is it important? After all, what's the real purpose of getting educated about anything? We so frequently take education and the process for learning in general totally for granted. Not only that, but the ways in which we think. How we've gone about structuring our own consciousness itself has largely remained unchanged for a long, long time. So how do we literally change our minds? Can we reconfigure our own ways of thinking? And if so, how? Join Dr. Joseph Atman, the founder of one of the world's most revolutionary educational centers, Middletree, and award-winning broadcaster Tammy Trujillo for Educate Everyone and explore the mysteries of our own consciousness and the education we implement in order for it to be what it is.
And our guest on this episode of Educate Everyone is Frank Torres. He's the Director of Strategic Initiatives for Middletree. In his role, he designs and scales district partnerships and programs and STEM and leaf enrichment, while leading strategy, proposals, and compliance aligned to California expanded learning quality standards company-wide. Now here's Frank and Dr. Joe.
Thanks so much for being here, Frank. Tell us a little bit about you, who you are, what you do, kind of general little synopsis of you.
I've been working with Middletree since October of 2015, so it's been quite a journey. I'm a local kid. I grew up about 10 minutes away from Claremont office. Grew up in Chino, California, where the all-star pitcher, all-star closer Chad Cordero is from, same high school. I don't really know him, but, same high school. Huge baseball fan. I actually just recently started coaching with my old travel team in my spare time. I also just recently celebrated my son's second birthday. My wife Kelly and I held a little party for him at my parents' house with a lot of family. So I've been reconnecting. That's kind of why I brought up the Chino aspect. I guess I never really got unconnected, but taking a new look at that, all those relationships I have with people I grew up with and my family, and of course my son, who I'm super proud of. His name is also, my real name is Francisco. His name is also Francisco. We call him Franco. So, we love him and we've been celebrating him. I'll never get tired of anything, but, we've been celebrating his birthday for a while now. So,
full disclosure to everyone. And maybe I should have started off with this, Frank. To say you've been instrumental in Middletree's growth as an organization is really selling it short. You have been Middletree more or less for a long time now. You and I really grew Middletree together for a good number of years there. So people know and understand, when I started Middletree, and as Frank mentioned, he came on in October. We started our first day of program was June of 2015. And Frank was there, a couple of months afterwards. When I started Middletree, we couldn't pay anyone. And I mean anyone, myself, anybody who came to work with us, right? We didn't have any money. And Frank, along with some others, but really it was mostly you, stood by us for years with just your full support. And Middletree wouldn't have gotten through those initial phases if we didn't have you doing what you were doing. But you also kind of set an example for a lot of other people, and you had a belief in what we were doing. And not only did you have a belief, you became what we were doing. You were the grease that made the engine run and then became the engine itself. This was basically a full-time job. You were there a lot of weekends also. So you were there like 7 days a week frequently, doing things on basically a volunteer level for a long time. So I think people should know that, and I think that should be recognized, and it's something that I will never forget, because as I already mentioned, without that effort from you and a number of other folks there at the onset, we wouldn't be where we are at today.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I would be there Monday through Thursday, have Fridays off, come in on Saturdays. So, I was doing a little bit of everything. They say that when you work for a nonprofit, you wear many hats. Yeah, I wore as many as I could. I majored in justice studies, which you have a kind of a major where you're focused on making sure that people get what they deserve. And a big part of that to me is that commitment to education, right? And so for me, I was educated in more or less working in nonprofits. That's kind of what justice studies is. We work for you. Know how to work with non-governmental educations, work in non-governmental organizations. And that piece, of course, is essential to working with Middletree. There's that education factor where, I went to school for this in a lot of ways. Of course, from the other side, there is just the passion for education that I grew up with. So I come from a family of educators. And so I think on my dad's side, we have 5 or 6 aunts and uncles who were educators. I think my dad and 3 of his sisters, he's one of 8. So my dad and 3 of his sisters were the ones who didn't work in education, but then their siblings and my dad's mom worked in education positions. And on my mom's side, we have, out of the cousins and my aunts and uncles, there's 6 or 7 teachers. So it's kind of something that feels natural to me. And I saw the vision that I think a lot of people might not have seen just due to my background, both familial and education-wise. I saw what this could become, and I wanted it to become what it has become. We work with students from all backgrounds, but one thing that a lot of people don't realize about what we do with our school district partnerships is that with some of the grants we work, us and the districts are required to provide priority registration to what are called McKinney-Viento students. And those are your students who are unhoused or have untenable living situations, foster kids.
They're in that system, yeah.
They're in that system. So to a lot of the kids, right, a lot of those kids, I don't want to toot our horn too much, but for a lot of those kids, school can be home for them. I mean, maybe they'll be in multiple homes in the area, and we can be something that is more consistent for them. At least that's what we try to do. And that is a point of pride for me. I did grow up in the area, so contributing to the area's health in that way, and that area's educational health in that way, is important to me. And being able to work and have gainful employment for myself doing that for others has always been part of the vision in my mind. And being able to do that and realizing that is a big deal for me. I love the fact that I can say that I contribute to that. It's been a long time since I worked directly with the students. Of course, those frontline staff who work directly with the students are what it's all about. I love doing what I do.
And I love hearing that also. I was going to mention, so I'm glad that you brought it up, that it was sort of implied, but maybe not directly expressed and articulated, that the way that you were the engine of Middle Tree in those initial years we're talking, not a couple of weeks or a couple of months, years, was that you were our main teacher. And in our program, for those who don't know, one of the main components of what we do at our centers is we have this unlimited program. And the idea behind the unlimited program is it allows students to come whenever they want to, stay for as long as they need to, study whatever they have to. So they're able to saturate with the material on their terms and in their own time, unlike what the school system does. And for years, you were the main teacher within that program. You said you wore a lot of hats. You had more titles and business cards with titles on them than hats, I think, because we changed your title so many times and changed your job description frequently, and where that I think is just finally settling down a little bit after a decade. But you every day work with students. So what was your main takeaway from working with students? And again, coming from a family of educators where it obviously did come very natural to you and you were so great with students, parents always wanted you, students always wanted you, everybody wanted your attention, everybody wanted your help. What was your main grab from that?
In working with the students and interacting with the families, I think the main takeaway is that raising a young person is very difficult. It's a second job after a lot of times your first job. There are certain things that can fall to the wayside. And I'm in no way judging people for this because it's so easy to do depending on what you normally do. A few things that fall by the wayside in terms of what you do with your young person, what you do with your kid, and your expectations you have for that young person, right? And so for me, you can kind of interact with a student. Some will say you can even interact with anybody up to an adult, but I'm not a psychologist, but when you work with a student, you can tell to a degree if they have regularly been read to, if their parents have read to them, if somebody in their family has read to them. To a degree, you can tell. At least if you were to hazard a guess, you'd have a good chance of seeing what's correct, right? And so imagine you're a 3 or 4 year old. Now at 4 years old, in the state of California, you're able to go into what's called transitional kindergarten. Imagine you go into transitional kindergarten. It's a new experience. You've never been on a school campus before in your life up to that point. You've never been with this many kids at the same time in your life up to this point. And you encounter books for the first time. Now, us as adults, people who have been through school for at least 12 years, 13 years, some of us 17, some of us 20 years, we can't imagine not being able to pick up a book and know what's backwards, what's forwards, how to hold it up right side up. We don't know that at 4 years old, maybe we don't know that you read from left to right. We maybe don't even know that the pictures in the book correspond to the words, or that the letters make sounds. And furthermore, if we're in that scenario and never been read to before, we maybe don't know that that's just something that most people can do. We all remember being a child, right, and wondering, maybe I will get behind the wheel and I just can't drive. Or maybe I don't know how to dress right for my first day of school, right? And these are all things that we look to our parents for. And if we don't have that for reading, if we don't have that culture of reading in our families, young people can be at a major disadvantage. That gap is, in my opinion, is widening because everybody's more and more busy every day. So in my parents' time, it was very common that mom and dad both have full-time jobs. And these days, mom and dad both have full-time jobs and they have social media, and their full-time jobs aren't 9 to 5. It's more like 7 to 6, depending on what the job is. So the reading books to your kids is the biggest one, but it's not just that. It's also when they get a little bit older and they get into algebra, they get into the higher maths. And it's so important for a child to see how their parent learns, how their parent reads, how their parent figures things out, how their parent problem solves. If you're thinking about yourself, you're wondering who in the world is the most like me on a molecular level, who has similar eyesight problems, who is similar height to me, who reacts the same way, who has my temper, right? That's your parents. And so when you're a child and you're encountering something that's difficult, it's really important that you see somebody who is like you struggling and working through that. One of the biggest benefits that I had growing up learning was watching my dad teach himself algebra for the 5th time. Yeah, I was his 5th child, right? And I saw him relearning algebra to teach my brother and help my brother with his homework. And it wasn't just that helping him with his homework and helping him learn the algebra. I was learning how to learn. I was learning, it's completely normal to 20 minutes to figure this out. It's completely normal to get frustrated and need to take a break sometime. The other part as a parent too is having the humility to have your child watch you not do well or not accomplish it right away. My dad had a temper, and watching him get frustrated with algebra helped me realize, maybe it's normal and maybe I can figure out how to last through this. Maybe I can build on what my dad was able to do. And that's so important to children. And I will say that in that way, I was very privileged because not everybody gets that time with their parents or with members of their family. It's a very lucky situation that I had. I think if you can't work with your child yourself, try the next best thing, your extended family or tutoring service like Middletree. For me, that's the biggest thing that I would see is that some of these kids clearly needed to see what their parents would do in the same situation.
So what is your advice to parents just in general so far as ensuring that their students are ready for school? Because you worked with our preschoolers all through high schoolers when you were on the ground with us working with students. You work with everybody. And that role, I think, as a parent evolves as your student gets older. So what's your advice for parents generally, not just for parents trying to prepare students for those initial stages of school, but what should parents be doing in general to help out their students?
There's a lot of things that parents can do, but I think I would like to share a major piece for me that has helped me work with kids and helped me as a father as well. The quote is, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly or late. And a lot of times it's really easy for educators and parents to really beat themselves up for not being able to do something perfectly. And a lot of times it's more important that you put in the effort or put in the attempt. There's a character on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It was Jake Peralta, Andy Samberg's character. And somebody says something to the effect of, Peralta, you're useless. And then Peralta says, well, I can be a bad example, right? And we don't want to necessarily be a bad example, our kids, but you got to get in there and give it a shot. That sounds real easy for me to say, right? Me with my 2-year-old, I guess you could say we're still in the good old days in a lot of ways. But I've heard parents, be anxious about reading in front of their children, doing math in front of their children, just talking to their children about things in general. You got to get in there. Even if you do not the best job of representing what you know or what an adult should know, those conversations and just being with your child, it's worth about as much as having your child in the best school system out there, right? You just got to get in there.
I think that so frequently parents just don't know what to do, how to operate, and sort of hand off students to the school system that needs as much support as it can get from all players involved. Not because they're inadequate, but because, as you mentioned, raising children, teaching students, it's a hard thing to do in every imaginable way. I hate to bring up COVID, but I feel like we bring up COVID on every show we do in some way or another. So unfortunately, I'm bringing it up here again. But I think a lot of people realize, a lot of parents realize during COVID that they were not educators, even to their own students. So I think it's really important. And I loved what you said about just getting in there, right? And getting up to bat and just giving it the old college try and attempting to work with your kids and attempting to just kind of sit down with them a little bit, even if you're not, the perfect teacher, even a good teacher. I think you're absolutely right, is children, especially of a certain age, but really of all ages. And this is actually something that all adults do as well to a certain degree, is we mimic and we imitate and we take cues from people, from situations, from the things that we're closest to and the things that we experience most readily and at hand. And for children, for younger students, what's readily at hand, what's in their immediate environment is frequently their parents or their family members, whoever is around them. And if they can get cues that are positive, even if, as you also mentioned, that positivity comes through them learning and understanding that struggling is a part of the process, I think that there's a lot to gain from that. And we so frequently, just to add on a little bit about that point of struggle, we so frequently want to avoid struggle and difficulty in all aspects of life, but especially in education, it's part of the process, is grappling with material that you've not encountered before. And so appreciating that journey, appreciating that struggle, appreciating that process isn't really taught to our students as much as just obtaining the solution, the answer, the result. So I think maybe it's, if not incumbent, certainly a great assist that parents could give their students, their children, to say, hey, I'm going to try and teach you at least some resiliency, at least give you some encouragement and allow you to understand that the process, the journey is what it is. It's not all about the results. And if parents could even just do that and just be a positive encouragement, a positive voice for students, students are going to pick up on that, of course. And if they could help shape that attitude for them, this is something I would always say to people when I was the only one doing job interviews is, gosh, even with people who maybe didn't have the resume, we can give you the skills, but we can't give you the attitude per se, because that's something that's either a part of a person's own inner nature, or it's that inner nature has been cultivated by who people are or who they were taught to be from a very early stage. So maybe if parents even just help cultivate that stick-to-itiveness, that character, and that is a cultural thing. And I don't even just mean cultural on a wide notion and basis, but that's something that's a family culture thing that can be, even if you're a single parent, that's something that it's a culture, a mentality that you can instill within your children. And that would be, I think, half the battle, if not more so, if parents could instill that resiliency, that toughness, that example that allows students to understand that it is okay to struggle and that it's just part of the learning process, and that's all right. And when you're going to get there at some point, it's going to make sense. So if parents could just be those kind of cheerleaders, that would be greatly helpful, I think, to educators in the professional setting.
Absolutely. And, sometimes you'll talk to people about their families, right? And you'll ask them about their educational background and what they do for work. And a lot of times what you'll hear is, we're not geniuses, but we were able to get that degree, or we were able to figure this out and make this happen. And even that, of course, you don't have to compare yourself to the so-called geniuses out there, but that acknowledgement that you can work through something and it's even expected is so powerful, right? It keeps that momentum going. So seeing that within a family is really helpful. Another piece sometimes that I think, and this is going a slightly different direction, but another piece that I think is underrated is showing that you as a family value education by making sure that your child, your student, has a space that's theirs, that they do their work in, a desk or a corner of the house or what have you. And I think sometimes we remember our childhoods and we're like, my joints never bothered me and I was so flexible. I could be out all night and what have you, right? But for children, sometimes that comfort, that physical comfort and that ownership is not a given. And in fact, far from it. So you can, as a parent, show your child that, listen, we're giving you this space that's yours for you to manage, to do your work, to read, to write. This is something that we value and we would like you to value it as well. I think it speaks volumes. And again, easy for me to say, not everybody has that luxury, right? Or that privilege to be able to do that. But if you can, that is so important. And I talk to friends sometimes and say, oh, I never had a desk growing up in the house, or I never had a space to do my homework. I just did it on the kitchen table. And then for whatever reason, I got to college and I really took off academically. Once you had your own space that you could take ownership of and have a physical manifestation of where your priorities are at, and that can do wonders for where you end up.
I think giving students something that they have some agency over, because yes, home is home, but a lot of students don't have their own space, and certainly not one that's dedicated to an academic focus. So I think that's incredibly important. During COVID, in fact, I made a run around the local news circuits, and that was one of the things that I had said. That was like the first tip I think that I had given, was give students that space. Set something up to where like this is designated to focus on whatever it is that you need to focus on, school-wise, academic-wise, reading, doing whatever, right? And I think you want to make it their own as well, and for it to be comfortable and yeah, just something that speaks to them.
And now the Middle Tree Minute.
This is Kristen Hernandez, Middle Tree's executive assistant. Transitions are one of the hardest parts of studying, not the studying itself. An easy study start ritual can tell the brain it's now time to focus. This could be something like filling up a water bottle, sharpening a pencil, or hitting play on a specific playlist. The key is that it's the same every time. Over time, the brain learns to associate that routine with concentration. It makes starting feel easier, and sometimes just starting is the biggest victory. And that's the Middle Tree Minute.
And now a quick look into Dr. Atman's book, A Philosophical War. Joe, for the past couple of episodes, we've been exploring this idea that human beings are always facing some kind of an existential crisis. Why is that the case?
Well, as we've also kind of discussed, there's some utility in having this lack of complacency, having this lack of contentment with where we're at. And a lot of that boils down to the fact that having this kind of mentality, again, can be very useful for survival specifically. It's kind of funny if we think about it. Frequently, a lot of us, even if things are going well, we're always looking for a problem. We're always looking for some difficulty because our brains are problem-solving machines. That's what they do. They learn and they solve problems, overcome obstacles, right? So that's what they are built to do. But that's kind of more of a mechanistic sort of approach. It's more utilitarian utilitarian kind of viewpoint of what our brains actually do. What we want to kind of focus on is kind of making a distinction between the brain, the functioning, like machine-like mechanism that is the brain, and that more ineffable, kind of deeper, mysterious thing that is the mind. So the brain frequently has these sort of reaction mechanisms sort of built into it. And they frequently manifest in forms like fear, anxiety, things that, again, kind of keep us on edge, keep us looking for problems, keep us in problem solving mode. How can we train ourselves to, even if there is a problem, get out of that space? Because again, these are frequently things that are more built into us biologically as modes of reaction. And again, I'm making a distinction here that could be argued as vast of a gulf or actual polarity that between the brain and the mind that may exist. But again, I'm talking about this in a way that hopefully allows us to think about things, no pun intended, a little bit differently. So when we were talking about the mechanistic approaches of the brain and that capacity, and then again, the deeper potentials of what the mind could allow for. So how could we put our mind at ease and then allow those pre-established and inherent functions that are much more reactions of the brain? How can we make those things operate in a harmonious kind of congress that would, even again, if we're encountering the most dire of circumstances, allow us to see that there is this pathway towards calmness and a capacity to be not in this sort of fight or flight mode, but something that really puts us in a better state overall. And then if we were able to sort of lessen that general reactionary response of that brain and let that mind kind of take over, and what would that allow for us to do so far as problem solving and just our general overall state of well-being from there. So we need to kind of unpack that also and get to the heart and core of the issue that really causes that anxiety in the first place. We talked about how a lot of this is actually something that's kind of baked into us and innate within us. But we're going to talk about something that's quite a bit deeper and really get to the heart of the issue as to why that might be baked into us and inherent within our brains in the first place.
Thank you for listening to Educate Everyone with Dr. Joseph Atman and Tammy Trujillo. Join us each week as we explore the inner workings of our own minds and the educational system which builds and supports it. Also, check out our website at middletree.org to see what opportunities Middletree's programs can offer you or your student. And join us on social media. If you have any questions you'd like Dr. Atman to answer, please leave them on a post or send us a message, and you may hear them answered on the next episode of Educate Everyone. Until then, thanks for tuning in.